the development of the use of materials is familiar to everyone. We can speak of an age of iron, before 1830, an age of steel, 1830 to 1910, and an age of alloys, light metals, and synthetics, since 1910. Naturally, all these dates are arbitrary and approximate, since the different periods commenced at different dates in different areas, diffusing outward from their origin in the core area of Western civilization in northwestern Europe. 6 periods of development. When we turn to the developments which took place in economic organization, we approach a subject of great significance. Here again we can see a sequence of several periods. There were 6 of these periods, each with its own typical form of economic organization. At the beginning, in the early Middle Ages, Western civilization had an economic system which was almost entirely agricultural, organized in self-sufficient manners, with almost no commerce or industry. To this manorial agrarian system there was added, after about 1050, a new economic system based on trade in luxury goods of remote origin for the sake of profits. This we might call commercial capitalism. It had 2 periods of expansion, one in the period 1050 to 1270, and the other in the period 1440 to 1690. The typical organization of these 2 periods was the trading company. In the second we might say the chartered trading company, like the Massachusetts Bay Company, the Hudson's Bay Company, or the various East India Companies. The next period of economic organization was the stage of industrial capitalism, beginning about 1770, and characterized by owner management through the single proprietorship or the partnership. The third period we might call financial capitalism. It began about 1850, reached its peak about 1914, and ended about 1932. Its typical forms of economic organization were the limited liability corporation and the holding company. It was a period of financial or banker management rather than one of owner management as in the earlier period of industrial capitalism. This period of financial capitalism was followed by a period of monopoly capitalism. In this fourth period, typical forms of economic organization were cartels and trade associations. This period began to appear about 1890, took over control of the economic system from the bankers about 1932, and is distinguished as a period of managerial dominance in contrast with the owner management and the financial management of the 2 periods immediately preceding it. Many of its characteristics continue, even today, but the dramatic events of World War II and the post-war period put it in such a different social and historical context as to create a new, 6th, period of economic organization which might be called the pluralist economy. The features of this 6th period will be described later. Stages of economic development. The approximate relationship of these various stages may be seen in the following table. Typical. Name dates organization management. Manorial 6701 Manor custom. Commercial capitalism A. 1050 to 1270 Company municipal mercantilism. B. 4401-690 Chartered state mercantilism. Company. Industrial capitalism 1770 to 1870 Private firm owners. Or partnership. Financial capitalism 1850 to 1932 Corporation and bankers. Holding company. Monopoly capitalism 1890 to 1950 Cartels and trade managers. Association. Pluralist economy 1934 Present lobbying groups technocrats. Finance and monopoly capitalism. 2 things should be noted. In the first place, these various stages or periods are additive in a sense. and there are many survivals of earlier stages until later ones. As late as 1925 there was a manor still functioning in England, and Cecil Rhodes's chartered company which opened up Rhodesia, the British South Africa Company, was chartered as late as 1889. In the same way owner-managed private firms engaging in industrial activities, or corporations and holding companies engaging in financial activities, could be created today. In the second place, all the later periods are called capitalism. This term means an economic system motivated by the pursuit of profits within a price system. The commercial capitalist sought profits from the exchange of goods, the industrial capitalist sought profits from the manufacture of goods, the financial capitalist sought profits from the manipulation of claims on money, and the monopoly capitalist sought profits from manipulation of the market to make the market price and the amount sold such that his profits would be maximized. 4 major stages of economic expansion. It is interesting to note that, as a consequence of these various stages of economic organization, Western civilization has passed through 4 major stages of economic expansion marked by the approximate dates 9701-270. 1440 to 1690, 1770 to 1928, and since 1950. 3 of these stages of expansion were followed by the outbreak of imperialist wars, as the stage of expansion reached its conclusion. These were the 100 Years' War and the Italian Wars, 1338 to 1445. 1494 to 1559, the Second Hundred Years' War, 1667 to 1815, and the World Wars, 1914 to 1945. The economic background of the third of these will be examined later in this chapter, but now we must continue our general survey of the conditions of Western civilization in regard to other aspects of culture. One of these is the fourth and last portion of the economic level, that concerned with economic control. 4 stages of economic control. Economic control has passed through 4 stages in Western civilization. Of these the first and third were periods of automatic control, in the sense that there was no conscious effort at a centralized system of economic control, while the second and fourth stages were periods of conscious efforts at control. These stages, with approximate dates, were as follows. 1. Automatic control, manorial custom, 6501150. 2. Conscious control A. Municipal mercantilism, 1150 to 1450 B. State mercantilism, 1450 to 1815. 3. Automatic control, laissez-faire in the competitive market, 1815 to 1934. 4. Conscious control, planning, both public and private, 1934. It should be evident that these 5 stages of economic control are closely associated with the stages previously mentioned in regard to kinds of weapons on the military level or the forms of government on the political level. The same 5 stages of economic control have a complex relationship to the 6 stages of economic organization already mentioned, the important stage of industrial capitalism overlapping the transition from state mercantilism to laissez-faire. The social level of a culture. When we turn to the social level of a culture, we can note a number of different phenomena, such as changes in growth of population, changes in aggregates of this population, such as rise or decline of cities, and changes in social classes. Most of these things are far too complicated for us to attempt to treat them in any thorough fashion here. We have already discussed the various stages in population growth, and shown that Europe was, about 1900, generally passing from a stage of population growth with many persons in the prime of life, type B, to a stage of population stabilization with a larger percentage of middle-aged persons, Type C. This shift from Type B to Type C population in Europe can be placed most roughly at the time that the 19th century gave rise to the 20th century. At about the same time or shortly after, and closely associated with the rise of monopoly capitalism, with its emphasis on automobiles, telephones, radio, and such, was a shift in the aggregation of population. This shift was from the period we might call the rise of the city, in which, year by year, a larger portion of the population lived in cities, to what we might call the rise of the suburbs, or even the period of megapolis, in which the growth of residential concentration moved outward from the city itself into the surrounding area. Changes in social classes. The third aspect of the social level to which we might turn our attention is concerned with changes in social classes. Each of the stages in the development of economic organization was accompanied by the rise to prominence of a new social class. The medieval system had provided the feudal nobility based on the manorial agrarian system. The growth of commercial capitalism, in two stages, gave a new class of commercial bourgeoisie. The growth of industrial capitalism gave rise to two new classes, the industrial bourgeoisie and the industrial workers, or proletariat, as they were sometimes called in Europe. The development of financial and monopoly capitalism provided a new group of managerial technicians. The distinction between industrial bourgeoisie and managers essentially rests on the fact that the former control industry and possess power because they are owners, while managers control industry, and also government or labor unions or public opinion, because they are skilled or trained in certain techniques. As we shall see later, the shift from one to the other was associated with a separation of control from ownership in economic life. The shift was also associated with what we might call a change from a two-class society to a middle-class society. Under industrial capitalism and the early part of financial capitalism, society began to develop into a polarized two-class society in which an entrenched bourgeoisie stood opposed to a mass proletariat. It was on the basis of this development that Karl Marx, about 1850, formed his ideas of an inevitable class struggle in which the group of owners would become fewer and richer while the mass of workers became poorer and poorer but more and more numerous, until finally the mass would rise up and take ownership and control from the privileged minority. By 1900 social developments took a direction so different from that expected by Marx that his analysis became almost worthless, and his system had to be imposed by force in a most backward industrial country, Russia, instead of occurring inevitably in the most advanced industrial country as he had expected.